As you can see in this film, they're very much focused on the problem of inequality in the supply chain in cocoa in Brazil. And this is true of much of cocoa production around the world. The vast majority of the wealth and the power is concentrated among a few, while the very many who produce the raw material, cocoa, for the production of chocolate do not earn the riches from what they produce. Now, to talk more about this, I would like to invite our full Brazilian delegation to the stage. So please come up and join us. Okay, so coming to the stage right now is Patricia de Mello Sanfelice. Patricia is a prosecutor working in the Labor Prosecutor's Office that was part of the team that commissioned this report. We also have Maria Claudia Falcão of the International Labor Organization in Brazil. So they're both joining us. And we have Marcos Casara, part of the team of Papel Social. Marcos Casara is an award-winning journalist from Brazil who has been conducting research on supply chains for decades now. And then, of course, you remember Poliana Dalla Brida from her excellent presentation just moments ago. And I'd also like to acknowledge Tatiana Cardial, who's here in the audience tonight. You're all welcome to wave at Tatiana. The photographs that you saw in Poliana's presentation were all made by Tatiana Cardial. We're very grateful for her for sharing her photographs with us. Now, just to begin our conversation, I would like to ask you, Patricia, to tell us a little bit about what your work is. We have microphones right here in front of you. And just describe for us what your work is in the Labor Prosecutor's Office.
Thank you, Carla. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and share this moment with you. I'm a member of the Labor Prosecutor Office in Brazil, which is an institution of the state of Brazil, not the government. I think it's important to make it clear because we have independence to act. And our goals are to assure that the relationships between workers and employers are regular, are following the law, are observing human rights, are respecting the person of the worker. This is the work of the Labor Prosecutor Office in Brazil. To do that, we have some main goals. The eradication of child labor, eradication of slavery, the good environment of labor, among others. But these three are related to decent work, which bring us to this partnership with ILO, International Labor Organization, and we do a lot of things together. And one of the most important actions we have together is this the work study, work group about the cocoa supply chain. We began this work because of some notices that we were receiving that in this supply chain we had both child labor and slavery labor. And unfortunately, we were able to prove that, to see that it's real, that we have both problems in this supply chain. So now, with the precious work of Papel Social, this organization that helped us to find this information, we can go ahead, we can do more, we can try to present some strategies, some ways to solve this kind of problem. So now the Labor Prosecutor's Office is trying to arrange a meeting with the main companies that works with the cocoa supply chain in order to seek them to commit, to make a commitment, a real commitment, a formal commitment in a document that they will be careful with the workers and with the children in their supply chain, because these are problems that most of all are not seen in the commerce. We don't see that when we buy the chocolate. It's all hidden in the process. So we could see, we have to make sure that the companies also notice and see that and don't allow that to happen, because we know good companies must be compromised with this. So we are trying to reach this meeting and present this document with a chain of obligations to make sure that the supply chain will be free from this kind of unacceptable work. We are doing this in the cocoa supply chain and also in other supply chains with ILO. This is one of our most important work. I believe it can bring very good results to Brazil as an economy included, because nobody wants this kind of situation in your history, in your present, in your past. So we are trying to make things better for the child, for the worker, for the company, for the people in Brazil. And we count with the friendship of you, with your partnership to help us achieve this goal. And I'll thank again Carla for this opportunity to bring a little about our work and how and also thank you for helping us to achieve this goal to free this supply chain of this kind of work.
Thank you so much. Maria Claudia, I'd like to ask you the same about your work with the International Labor Organization and what drew you to conduct this research.
Okay. Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really happy because we could stimulate the debate around this theme. As Carla already said very well, I am from the ILO. ILO is one of the specialized agency of the United Nations organization that has as the main objective is the social justice through the promotion of decent work. So we have some standard conventions about some minimal labor standards that the countries that once they ratified this convention, we have office in these countries in order to support the governments and the employers and the workers to adapt this convention to their legislation. So in the case of Brazil, we are there for a long time. We started the IPEC, that is the International Program for the Elimination of Child Labor, since 1992. And we have been working with the Brazilian government. I can say that the Brazilian government is internationally recognized for its fight against child labor and forced labor, but unfortunately we still have these two cases of this problem in Brazil, and we have been working with the Labor Prosecutors Office for a long time. But I can say that this partnership has been formalized in 2016 when we signed a cooperation agreement where the MEPT is easier than say labor prosecutors, so I will say MEPT could allocate to the ILO some resources from fines or compensation action to the reconstitution of the labor rights that were harmed. So through this agreement, it was possible to carry out this study, and we are starting in the ILO. The ILO has been discussing the supply chains, I think that since the beginning of 2010, but the ILO Brazil started to work on the supply chain issues in 2016, and we are trying a new strategy to eliminate child and forced labor in Brazil through supply chains, because we have a lot of public policy to eliminate child labor and forced labor, but I think that they came to a point that it is impossible to eliminate through this traditional public policy. So we are trying a new strategy. We are just beginning it. So this kind of opportunity is very good for us to have this kind of debate, especially in this university that is very important for us, to receive a lot of information, because we are building this. This is the first step, and it is the beginning. We need to throw this, so through the results that we have in this report, we need to develop an intervention plan, because our goal is to change the lives of the people that are involved in this kind of situation. So that's it. I think that it's an important moment for us to discuss and to discuss the next steps. Thank you.
Now, Marcus and Poliana, would you tell us a bit about why you chose to make a film to accompany the working paper?
Por que a gente escolheu fazer um filme para acompanhar o documentário?
Posso falar em português? Você me ajuda?
Vou traduzir.
Ok. Thank you.
Thank you.
A gente escolheu fazer o filme porque é uma maneira da gente dar voz às pessoas que estão na base da cadeia.
They chose to make a film because it's a way of giving a voice to the people who are at the base of the supply chain.
Porque, Carla, a gente está diante de uma situação bastante grave que envolve violações dos direitos de crianças, de pessoas adultas, e que é algo que está posto, está apresentado, não há mais como esconder.
And it's because they're documenting the abuses of rights of children and of adults that are often hidden or secret abuses, and it's a way of bringing them to the public eye.
E o que mais assim me surpreendeu nesse trabalho, obviamente que além de encontrar situações de violação de direitos humanos do trabalho infantil, foi identificar, a partir de uma extensa investigação, que as maiores empresas globais do setor de alimentos não têm nenhum controle sobre a sua cadeia produtiva no que diz respeito ao cacau e ao chocolate.
And so the thing that surprised them perhaps the most about the research, even beyond the extensive research that they did that uncovered these human rights violations, is that they learned that multinational corporations do not, in the Brazilian cocoa and chocolate supply chain, have control over the supply chain. They're not able to ascertain the origin of the cacao that they buy.
As empresas, essas multinacionais, elas, nesse momento, elas estão ainda na fase de negação do problema e na tentativa de tentar desconstruir a pesquisa e o filme. Então, o que eu gostaria era de convidar as empresas para que a gente supere logo essa primeira etapa, para que a gente possa passar para ações efetivas que, de fato, possam mudar o cenário atual da cadeia produtiva do cacau e do chocolate.
And now they're very interested to invite these companies to be a part of solving these problems in the supply chain.
Porque, de fato, o nosso trabalho é a favor, não é contra as empresas, é a favor dos direitos humanos.
Yes, and it's important to emphasize that this is not work that is against companies, it is work that is in favor of human rights.
E nós ficamos muito contentes em saber que o FCCI e a Universidade de Harvard se interessaram e estão agora conosco envolvidos nesse processo. Então eu agradeço e eu acho que é uma contribuição bastante importante a gente ter instituições internacionais contribuindo para que a gente possa avançar em processos de mudança junto com o Ministério Público do Trabalho e com a Organização Internacional do Trabalho. Muito obrigado.
And he's thanking Harvard University and FCCI for being international institutions that are interested in supporting this type of work and contributing to ongoing conversations in this space. Now, I'm curious, were you to create a national dialogue around the supply chain and cocoa and chocolate, how would you like that to look?
Eu não entendi qual foi.
Como é que vai fazer esse grupo nacional? In the case of dialogue, we have as one of our strategies the promotion of the social dialogue. So we want not only the companies, the enterprise, but also to put together in the same table to talk the companies, the government, and the workers. Because as we saw in the video, for example, there are no public policy in these municipalities that produced cacao. So we need to develop these municipalities because it is necessary that the companies take care about the municipalities where they have some influence. So it's not to replace the government, but support the government in order to implement the public policy there. So I think that it's important to the promotion of the social dialogue. We want to create a working group where we have representatives from the government, from the employers, and from the workers, in a way that we could elaborate a participative plan for this intervention in these municipalities that produce cacao.
I think it's important to say that we have complementary work. Other than these activities with ILO, we have a project that is called Rescuing Childhood, which means to help the cities to improve the public policy of fighting child labor. Also, we talk to the companies in the city to. We have a law in Brazil that generates an obligation of the companies of contract apprentices, the age 14 and plus. So we search that the companies follow that rule. And the third goal is to discuss what child labor means in schools, because we have a culture problem in Brazil that the people think child labor is something good, is something that is better for a kid, because if the kid is not working, he would be stealing or he will be doing drugs, as it was a positive alternative to some kids. And we have to show the people who think that it's not an alternative, not a positive alternative. And why would it be positive for some kids and to others we wouldn't think about it? So we'd like to discuss that with the population to not accept anymore this kind of violation, which sometimes are seen as something positive, as I said. So we went to Medicilândia, which is that that city that produces cocoa, like one of the most important in Brazil producers of cocoa. We went there because of the problems we found, and we began this work of talking to the municipality, which have, as we could see in the documentary, a lot of problems. Some of them because of the way the production occurs. We talked to the teachers to discuss this matter in the schools, and now we are seeking the results. It's I think 6 months we went there. Now is the time to see what happened after we went there. It's another kind of work we are doing that maybe could bring some results too. We think this problem is very complex, so probably we wouldn't solve it with one only way of acting. We have to think the problem the same way he is, complex with so many alternatives we could think about it. So that's the way the MPT is working to solve this problem specifically in Medicilândia, but also in other cities with other questions that are related to child labor.
Well, we have like a simple ambition, and the multinational companies need to admit the problem. This is the first thing that we want, that we are looking for. Admit, stop denying this problem, and then start to be transparency, start to improvement transparency strategies, and open the supply chain and give the public, to the audience, access of their strategy, and start to really start doing something, and with transparency and public access.
Absolutely, and certainly transparency is something that we ask more and more of producers today, whether it be through certifications, through sharing information about labor practices on their farms, sharing information about pricing. So it seems that this can be a two-way road, this level of transparency. Yeah, thank you for that. Now, I'd like to see if anyone in the audience has questions for the panel. Please.
Hi, my name is Louise. I'm a visiting scholar at the history department here at Harvard, and I studied the southwest of Amazonia. So I've researched a lot about the rubber trade system. And I would like to ask you two questions. Well, first of all, congratulations for your research and for all the work that you have been doing. It's very important, and I hope you get the results that you're seeking. So my first question is, could you explain a little bit this difference, this technicality between working conditions analogous to slavery and slavery that you use? And the second question is, well, yeah, it's just this question.
Acho que a Patrícia pode
The
responder.
question is, can you describe the difference, this technicality between the term conditions analogous to slavery and slavery?
Sorry, just remember the second question. In your research, have you been able to observe, or do you know, or could you measure the impact that the program Bolsa Familia had on this environment? You know, a program that was aimed at, amongst many goals, keeping children in school by way of paying some sort of economic assistance to the families.
Yes, and so the second question is, could you explain the potential impact of the Bolsa Familia program, which is a program designed partly to keep children in schools by providing financial remuneration to families?
Well, I'll try to answer the first one, and I think Papel Social is better to answer the second one because they went there, so I think they have more there. Slavery and conditions analogous to slavery. We in Brazil we have the penal type that is conditions analogous to slavery, because slavery is that historical condition that forced. It's more linked to forced labor, and we have other types of work that could be seen as like forced labor, which is exhaustive journey. It's conditions analogous to slavery. It's not the concept of slavery itself, but it received the same treatment by the law. It's a crime.
Conditions of work, number of hours.
Não, mas ela não me lembro da quarta.
Debt bondage.
Yes, that bondage, which is also something that is not slavery per se, but it has the same treatment. So it's more like a technical difference to make sure that this kind of unacceptable work will be criminalized, will be put in the penal type that assures the conviction of the one who put someone in these conditions. I think it's more or less the explanation.
And for anyone who's interested, we anticipated this question, And on the blog for chocolateinstitute.org, we've actually detailed the technical definitions from the ILO and from the Brazilian government of what they mean for conditions analogous to slavery. So
yes, it's exactly what I would say. That is, it's the Brazilian conception of it's like slave labor and forced labor. Brazilian in the criminal code we have the concept of slave labor that is wider than the forced labor because it's composed by forced labor plus the conditions of work, the four types that Juliana mentioned during her presentation.
Yeah, I think the more accurate term is modern slavery
Sí.
or
Yes.
conditions analogous to slavery. These two terms are the same, modern slavery and conditions
But
analogous to
in
slavery.
the criminal code we have conditions analog.
Yeah, we
That's
try to use
the
more this
crime.
term in the
Yes.
research. And about the second question, Bolsa Familia is a fundamental program, and it's very important to take the family, the cocoa farmers, all the families in Brazil from the poverty, misery, extremely poverty line, and give one step of dignity. And we interview some cocoa farmers that receive this Bolsa Familia program, and others who didn't receive because they didn't have all the documents, they didn't have even access to a social assistance, they couldn't go to a social assistance center and ask for their right. So it's a very precarious situation. And all the children that we met, all the family that we interviewed, the children was studying. They were studying, and the work of these children happened in the other part of the day. So if they study during the morning, they will help the fathers. They will work during the afternoon. So this wouldn't keep the Bolsa Familia program, the Bolsa Familia assistance that forced the family keeping the children of the family in the school. And anything else? We realized that Bolsa Familia is just a first step to give dignity of this family, but the income is very small, is very low. It wouldn't change the generation of the family. We need to break this circle of exploitation, and we think that only the next generation with education, a good education, being yeah, they need to learn how to make the cocoa. They need to improve their knowledge on the quality cocoa to improve their income. And only we think the next generation can be free from the Bolsa Familia program, which is fundamental, but it's just a first step, and go toward their independence.
Do we have additional questions? Please, go ahead.
Hey, this was fantastic. So thank you so much for coming over here and for doing this incredible work. We're coming from the MIT Lab for Chocolate Science, which is a student group that's particularly interested in the science of chocolate. And I'm curious how you think that certifications like fair trade, or I think there's some like no slavery product certifications, if those have been effective in holding the multinationals accountable, or if there are other mechanisms that you think policymakers or consumers can be looking out for.
So the question is, do certifications work, more or less? Or are there other things that are necessary as well?
Well,
more or less.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's an interesting
Difficult
question.
question.
Thank you.
We do not have
We spoke with the Goodside family in the Panorama farm, and they are trying to receive and to obtain a lot of certificate programs. They are crazy about this, which is a good thing because they need to make a lot of steps to improve the quality of the cocoa and also the quality of worker relationships. So in this kind of farmers, it's working because they are from families with more resources. They are rich family in Pará, so they have the knowledge and they know how to improve. In some cases, the cocoa farmers are poor families, so they they have this lack of technical knowledge to improve and to get the certification. But what we saw in the Panorama farm and other in the Sítio Dia Lindo farm that we went, that they are trying uh, to fit their production and their relationship with the workers to obtain the certificate. But we also found, what we also saw, not only in the cocoa supply chain, but in other supply chain, the most of some of the certifications programs are just looking on the quality of the product. So this is the first concern about the certification: is the quality of this work, the cleaning of the local, things like this, and the concern about the relationships with the workers became in a second plan.
E não é só no cacau, quer dizer, tem outras cadeias que é o mesmo problema que a gente encontra no
Yeah,
trabalho
this is a
escravo.
common issue that we found researching not only on the cacao but in other supply chains.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer. We do not have the answer. I think that the certification could be an alternative, but depends on the criteria of this certification. And I think that it's very important to discuss, again, in a participative way, which will be the criteria for this certification, because sometimes it comes from the companies. I think that it's important that everybody should discuss this criteria and everybody should know their responsibility on this. And it's not only for the farmers, not only for the companies, but also for the local governments. I think that it's important to involve everybody in this criteria for the certification.
I believe another important thing about certification is the inspection of that after it was implemented. We have a very important inspection force in Brazil that, for example, made the Panorama farm change the way of production because of Panorama farm was convicted of slavery, modern slavery. So we can create a certificate as we have the compliance auditors now. We ask the companies to show us, and they show reports, perfect reports. But in fact, they are only documents. They don't represent the real thing, what really happens when we are not looking. So we need eyes to look. If you got the certificate, you got to assure that we have the state have eyes to see if the certificate corresponds to the real. I think that's an important issue to think about.
And if I could add a global perspective in all of this, Brazil globally is the least certified cocoa country. So there are the least amount of certifications in cacao in Brazil. Now that's for several reasons. One is Brazil focuses primarily on what's called the cabruca system, which is an agroforestry system for growing cacao. And the yield, so the amount of fruit that people get on the trees, can be lower in this type of system. Now, the cost of certification is shouldered by the producer. And so if the producer is making less money from cacao, they have less money to then invest in a certification. Sometimes a certification is not profitable or valuable for them. In addition, the industry itself has not necessarily demanded that cacao be certified. So they are at present happy to buy uncertified cacao in Brazil. So it's really quite a complex situation. When we compare it with a country like the Dominican Republic, which is the most certified cacao country in the world, it's a very different situation there. And that's because their cacao has a different home. It's going in different directions. So market forces change the way that certifications operate. And we also know that certifications are not a panacea. They don't fix every problem in cacao. They do help with some. But for example, certifications were introduced into West Africa after evidence of forced labor, of the worst forms of child labor, was uncovered. And certifications have not succeeded yet in eradicating those problems. So they remain an important part of this conversation, but they'll never function solely as the one medicine for this disease. Yes, please, sir.
The actual government, the recent government in Brazil, extinguishes the labor minister, finished with the labor minister. Do you think that the agenda of the new government help what you are intended to do?
Okay, this is great because
It's going to the right direction?
Right.
so
Yes.
you know, we're here in the United States. We have our own polemical questions that we need to answer about our own government. So I'll just repeat the question: is the current government of Brazil has done away with the position of Minister of Labor, and do you think that this is a climate that is helpful to your work or counterproductive?
Thank you for your question. In fact, this fact of the extinction of labor ministry was object of a manifestation of labor prosecutor's office in order to defend the presence of this important minister, because it was historical. It always existed, and we have many actions that are linked to this minister. In fact, it was extinguished, it doesn't exist anymore, but all the actions remains. They remains. We don't know how it will be for now forward, but until now we have the same actions possible. Of course, it was a little sooner that began the weakness of the inspection. I think since 2016, maybe, we had lower resources, we had a lot of problems that began in that year. Now it's a problem more complex, and we are dealing with it because we have to. We don't have another option. We have to deal with it. So we don't have a labor minister anymore. It was an important partnership of our actions, important, always in the table with us in every discussion we had. Now we continue in the table, but now it's called economy mystery, and it's a little bit awkward. We don't see it like a thing that could be possible, but it's happening, so it's possible, and we have to deal with it. I think probably it's not a good thing. My point of view, my personal point of view, it's not a good thing. The institutional I belong thinks that, so did a manifest claiming to not happen this. And now another situation happened last week, I think, a law, a decree that probably will extinguish all the forums and commissions that has society among the government, and they are corps with several personalities and institutions. It is also going down. So we again are doing lots of acts and manifests to claim, please don't do that. It's important that we discuss it with the society, that the society has a place to be in this kind of matter. But that's the kind of thing we are facing in Brazil, but we can't let it destroy what we are doing. That's why in the beginning I said we are independent. We are not with the government. We are not dependable the government can't extinguish the labor public prosecutor's office because it's a command of the Constitution. So just changing the Constitution to do this kind of change. I don't think it's coming soon, soon enough. So I believe we will be able to continue this work even if we have this kind of difficulty to deal with.
In the case of ILO, it is very difficult because the Minister of Labor is our constituent. But as labor prosecutors office, we have keep working with them in the same way. Now they are a national secretary, but I think that it's important to reinforce, to highlight that the Minister of Labor now, that is a national secretary, they have a technical group that is the labor inspectors, and they keep working there as the same way. So the ILO, we are working with them in the same way. We are doing the same things that we used to do, and we are waiting for the next week to see what will happen. But until now, we keep our work with them, even though now they are a national secretary, no more the Minister of Labor.
Okay, we have time for
Carla,
one
eu
more
gostaria de
question.
falar rapidamente.
Sim, por favor.
Se você puder me ajudar com a tradução. Eu acho que a extinção do Ministério do Trabalho é um episódio de um processo em que o Brasil se encontra, em que ele está em rota acelerada rumo ao agravamento das condições de direitos humanos no país.
Okay, so he sees that this elimination of the Ministry of Labor is an example of Brazil's acceleration toward further problems in human rights.
E isso tem um efeito direto nos negócios internacionais feitos pelas empresas que estão instaladas no Brasil ou que têm negócios com empresas brasileiras. Porque em algum momento essas empresas vão precisar responder pelas agressões ao meio ambiente que estão se agravando e pelas violações de direitos humanos. Então, eu acho que toda a cadeia produtiva da economia brasileira corre o sério risco de passar a ser questionada pelos compradores internacionais, na Europa, nos Estados Unidos e na Ásia.
And so he finds that this puts all of the businesses operating in Brazil at risk because it will immediately affect their businesses and eventually they will be held to task. They will have to answer for violations toward the environment or of human rights.
E eu acho que o Brasil vai precisar muito do apoio da comunidade internacional que preza pela democracia e pelo respeito aos direitos humanos muito rapidamente, assim, muito em breve, porque a situação realmente não é boa.
And he feels that urgently it's necessary that Brazil has the support of international human rights organizations in order to address the grave problems that they're experiencing at home. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And I saw, yes, please.
Hi, thank you for the excellent talk. I really appreciate it. So my question is, in terms of some of the agrarian reform and resistance movements in Brazil, how are these current efforts fitting into the scope of that? So what are people in these communities, workers, doing to try and resist maybe some of the exploitation? And number two, what are the gender dimensions around this problem? Because I heard a lot of talk about fathers and sons, and so I was curious how, if there were any type of how women and girls were also maybe impacted.
So it's actually two questions. What are some of the agrarian reform movements in Brazil that might be part of reforming the cacao supply chain? And then, is this a gendered issue? Because we've talked a fair amount in our presentations about the work of men in cacao, but how is this also affecting the work of women and girls?
Well, about your first question, this has to do also with the current government in Brazil, because the main social movement in Latin America about the agrarian reform and the ecological production is typed by Bolsonaro's government as a communist terrorist organization. So this is what they are facing now, the MST, and the
For anybody who doesn't know, MST is Movimento Sem Terra. It's the landless keepers movement in Brazil.
and also the cocoa farmers do this lack of knowledge, lack of education. They didn't see themselves as a small farmer who needs to find against like a big enemy, like the system, like the multinational companies. They see the MST as the enemy because they are trying to violate our lands. They didn't see that there are more points in common than, for example, with the multinational companies. So it's a very difficult issue to make them understand that they are being exploitation and they need to change and they need to the social movements, because there is this speech, this hate speech against social movements, against the PT, the worker partner, against Lula, against everything, and they're very confused about what to do right now. And the second question about gender, yes, we saw that because the boys has more strong, they are stronger than the girls, so they help more than the girls. But as we saw, one of the students talking about, the girls are also involved with the cropping process. And if the boys are doing the collect of the cocoa fruit and putting in the basket, the girls are more concentrated in taking the cocoa seeds, the beans of cocoa out of the fruit. So we saw like a division of work, but it's a problem that affects boys and girls, and there is no it isn't only a gender problem, but also, of course, we need to look at this issue because it affects the maybe this girl, while his parents are in the cropping, are in the if she's not helping, she's doing homework and housework, excuse me, and doing in their home, so they can get to school. They want the boy will be the privilege. If some of them needs to go to the university, they will send the boy because he's more independent in their thoughts.
Yes, you can see how immensely complex all of this is. And of course, globally, we know that women are less likely to receive agricultural extension services or education for their work on farms. It's also the case often that girls are less likely to be sent to school than boys. So these get all the more complex as we think about them in a global context. I was very happy to learn several months ago that one of the women who is part of the Associação Vinto Bar, I'll see if I can get this slide to come back up. You see the logo displayed here. Juliana Aquino was working with some colleagues to create Mulheres no Chocolate Network, so Women in Chocolate Network. And so on the gender front, there is interesting work occurring in Brazil, where now women working in chocolate are getting together to try and confront some of the gender inequality that they face. And we hope that, of course, many of these women also work in cacao, so it will extend to women in cacao as time goes on. And on that note, we've talked a lot about potential solutions to these problems. And I wanted to take a moment to recognize some of these companies that are operating with more transparent supply chains in Brazil. You have in front of you 7 different samples of chocolate that have been donated by these companies as evidence of their work in good flavor. But we're also happy to report that they have considerably more transparent supply chains. And one of the things that we believe, and we've discussed this a lot over the past 2 days, is that these companies, as small as they might be, are able to prove it is possible to control your supply chain and to know whether or not labor abuses exist within it. The challenge, of course, is that many of these companies are quite small. They're actually niche companies. So the amount of cacao that they work with in Brazil is microscopic when compared with the vast majority of cacao, which is going toward multinational companies. And so it will be a question of seeing, can these types of companies grow and flourish? Is there enough consumer demand for this type of chocolate that we can continue to push through market forces for a different type of supply chain? And of course, all of that work will be necessary in concert with civil society organizations, with the government, with academics, and more. Now, just to introduce you to the chocolates that you have in front of you, the first one on your tray is from Baiani, and you can see their logo depicted here. And this is a 70% chocolate that is produced. And Baiani is a vertically integrated, what we call tree-to-bar company, meaning that they control their own cacao production as well as their own chocolate production. It's really a quite unique model, and you can only do it in places where cacao is grown. So they're an excellent opportunity for the growth of the market in Brazil. We also have this example here, Mission Chocolate. And this is your second sample. This is a bar that contains cupuaçu. And cupuaçu is a cousin of cacao that in this case has been processed much like chocolate would be processed. But of course you'll see it doesn't taste particularly like chocolate. So
Yes.
quite interesting. Then we have three bars from the company Luisa Abram. Now, Luisa Abram has been doing very unique work where she and her family, along with experts in cacao, travel into the Amazon and seek out cacao in different regions. They call it wild cacao. It's cacao that is not formally cultivated. And they work with local communities to harvest that cacao, to pay them a fair price for it, and then to create chocolate from it. And then finally, because they were interviewed in the film, and they are an example of a farm that has been able to make good on better labor practices and that is now vertically integrating to produce chocolate, we also have two samples from Goodsite chocolates on your trays. We have one that is a dark milk bar, so 57% cocoa content, and another that is dark chocolate at 70%. And we were very fortunate that they agreed to send this chocolate. You may remember Elton Goodsite was interviewed in the film. He was the young gentleman who was portrayed moving for drying beds around and who talked about the necessity of maybe creating a type of organization or union of people in the Amazon region so that they could together be empowered to work toward the success of the Amazon. And we include this tonight because we want you to have examples of potential models for what works in the cacao and chocolate system. Originally, when slavery first existed during the colonial period, people believed there was no alternative. They believed that the only way that things could be made was with slavery. And this is often true in the contemporary period. Many companies really wonder, how could we possibly work differently within our supply chains? And the truth is they can. We need innovative and creative solutions. We need compelling and practical alternatives. And these continue to exist. These are not impossible problems to solve. They are difficult, but they are very much solvable problems. They simply require the time, the investment, the research, and the collaboration to succeed. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for your time tonight. I'd like to thank our guests for coming so far to share their expertise with us. Please give yourselves a round of applause. And We're now going to cut the live stream of this event, but I'll remind you that we will be sharing a recording on YouTube, so that will exist permanently for anyone to access. We will also be sharing the slide presentations, and in short order, the documentary itself will be available for people to view. So please, should you have questions, doubts about anything that we've discussed tonight, this working paper and this film were designed to stimulate conversation. So we encourage you to contact us and to speak with us more about all of this. For those of you who are staying in the audience, you're welcome to come up and ask questions individually of our guests. And thank you again for being here.
Levar pra tirar foto. Dando não se mexer.